Le capitalisme engendre une dynamique permanente d'accumulation, de crise et d'innovation.
I believe that open markets and free enterprise are the best imaginable force for improving human wealth and happiness.
Je pense que les forces sociales et politiques sont les forces centrales dans la dynamique du capitalisme.
Did you ever have a moment of doubt about capitalism?
Is there some society you know that doesn't run on greed?
How would Smith see the economic world around us?
I think Keynes would have said the problem is the hole in the economy.
Hayek really wrote The Road to Serfdom as a warning.
You always have to be careful with Marx about the one-liners.
Polanyi, for me, was an intellectual earthquake.
I mean, if I had to stereotype Ricardo, I would say he would look like George Soros.
Si vous retournez chez Adam Smith, Marx, Schumpeter, vous avez des embryons de mécanismes vous permettant de comprendre la crise actuelle.
We were told that capitalism is the product of big thinkers and big ideas. But is it true? How did ideas shape our lives? What is their relation to reality? Can they help us understand today's economic crisis, let alone the future of capitalism? Chinese students visit the grave of Adam Smith, the 18th century Scottish philosopher.
Adam Smith is very honored, and he wrote a very famous book. I don't know what's in English, but in China we call it 国富论, and most all of us know it.
I root for the free market team. Adam Smith is my star player.
Back in 1776, economist Adam Smith shocked everyone by saying that what governments should actually do is just leave people alone to buy and sell freely among themselves.
It's as persuasive now as it was then.
Everybody here knows Adam Smith, he's self-interest and greed is good, and the invisible hand and free enterprise and free markets, etc., all that he's the father of capitalism.
But is he? For many, the philosopher and his book are linked to the birth of capitalism. History, however, suggests that capitalism was born hundreds of years before him, and so our story begins not with the man, but with the world that gave birth to him.
Now, Smith himself was brought up in an interesting port on the east coast of Scotland. The society he lived in was going through an absolutely profound revolution in its public life. The Glorious Revolution in Britain had brought about a religious revolution in Scotland. And then a few years later, Scotland is united to England by an Act of Union, the Act of Union of 1707, which is still in force. And that again brings about a political revolution. The point about this revolution in public life in Scotland, as far as Smith is concerned, is that it puts a great onus on the Scottish middling ranks. And the duty of this class is to seek the improvement of public life, the improvement of Scottish institutions, the improvement of Scottish religion, the improvement, above all, of the Scottish economy.
When Smith moved from Kirkcaldy to this house in 1778, he moved with his mother, who was, by that stage, a very frail old lady. When Smith lived in Kirkcaldy, he was used to being able to look out onto vast expanses of beach, of sea. Here, he's overlooking gardens, overlooking the Canongate Church, which he and his mother worshipped at. It's interesting because from one of these windows, Smith was able to look out over the monument to his old and very best friend and partner, David Hume. Hume and Smith's philosophical partnership was one of the great formative influences on shaping the Scottish Enlightenment. Hume and Smith, two men who were as like as peas in a pod intellectually, both had the ambition to try and develop a philosophy, a science even, that would explain the principles of human behavior, explain the principles of social organization and of historical change without any reference whatsoever to religion.
In the beginning, there was empty space. And in this empty space, there emerged a primordial fireball. Billions of years ago, this fireball exploded.
Adam Smith, like other philosophers of his time, was searching for laws that could explain human development, a science of man. They were looking to nature as a source of social order.
Science was a belief system of the time. As God and sort of theological hierarchies begin to sort of break down, one of the things that begins to emerge is an idea that if we can no longer look at the universe as God's creation, we need to start looking at the universe as a creation which has some kind of absolutist logic to it. Carl Linne, who was a botanist, decides that he's going to take the entire natural world and define it as a system that is completely integrated and that is hierarchical. And so he starts working on this project called the Systema Naturae, the system of nature. It's an attempt to sort of take the natural world and to make it a logical model. His model is based on the monarchy. So he creates the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom, and he originally planned on doing the mineral kingdom. What he's doing is taking the social structure of his time and turning it into a natural hierarchy. In other words, that hierarchy is not something that has been created by the sword, but rather hierarchy and inequality is something that has been created by nature. By the 18th century, which is Adam Smith, in many ways there is already this idea that reason and science and structure are things that are the architecture of truth.
In 1763, almost 30 years after the publication of Systema Naturae, Adam Smith arrives in Paris. He's on a quest to find the natural order of the economy, the basis for his wealth of nations.
In Paris, he moves instantly to the circle of the physiocrats, the économistes, and to François Quesnay, who is the leader.
François Quesnay, c'était un médecin, donc qui n'avait pas, qui était ni philosophe ni économiste, et qui, il faut le dire parce que c'est important, était tout à fait fasciné à son époque par la Chine. Il était très proche des idées de Confucius, d'ordre naturel, de vertu, de société équilibrée, d'économie relativement fixée, figée, avec des producteurs intangibles, etc. Keynes se pose la question de l'économie en disant on doit pouvoir construire le circuit de l'économie. C'est-à-dire établir qui produit pour vendre à qui, qu'est-ce qu'elle produit et pour qui, donc voir tous les flux d'échange de produits comme d'argent entre les acteurs.
Classical economics was founded by two doctors. William Petty, a surgeon in Ireland, and François Quesnay in France, founded physiocracy. And their concept of circular flow between producers and consumers was inspired by their view of the bloodstream. They said, just as in the human body there's a circular flow of blood to the organs, so the economy is very much like a human body, and it circulates blood from the producers to the consumers.
Quesnay était quelqu'un qui, justement par l'influence des idées chinoises de Confucius, considérait qu'il y avait un ordre établi quasi naturel, il disait même un ordre naturel divin qu'il fallait conserver. Donc en ce sens-là, c'est peut-être normal que Smith et d'autres après reprennent cette idée-là ou mentionne les idées des physiocrates comme étant importantes pour eux, puisque c'était la première fois peut-être qu'on établissait cet ordre naturel et qu'on donnait les mesures pour le maintenir.
According to Smith, faith in the natural order of the free market could be observed here, in one of the more remote regions on Earth.
What we can see in Smith's work is an exercise in putting together an absolutely enormous science of man.
He claimed that the origin of the economy is rooted in the natural human capacity for trading and bartering. In evidence, he offered the savage tribes, as he called them, of the Americas.
Adam Smith was the first person to really lay it out elaborately and explicitly. Once upon a time, when there was no money, people would have to swap things directly. You know, I would say, tell you what, I'll give you 20 chickens for that cow. All right, maybe 25 chickens.
When we lived in caves, there were no shopping malls, and people's manners were Neanderthals. I'll give you this for that, that for this. We'll make a trade called barter. I'll give you this for that, that for this. We'll have it made with barter.
And, you know, people would negotiate, they'd come to a deal. That's how the economy worked. Gradually that becomes inconvenient. Maybe you don't want my chickens, I don't have anything else you want. So we settle on one thing that everybody's gonna want. That becomes money.
It was a radical idea. For the first time, economic activity was stripped of its complex social context. Psychology, cultural norms, religion, and community, and studied in isolation, as if in a laboratory.
It makes perfect intuitive sense. The problem is it isn't true. No one's ever been able to find any place where that's the way ordinary transactions take place. And if you think about it, it's kind of obvious why they wouldn't, because it assumes that even in a Neolithic village, everybody's going to be dealing with each other on what economists call the spot trade. I give you something, you give me something, we walk away.
Adam Smith's idea of barter and trade could have easily been demonstrated by the way these hunters in this isolated community barter and trade their hunt.
Yes.
The problem, however, is that they don't, and they never have.
Y ahora, ¿cómo es la repartición de la carne? ¿Solo el que ha cazado lleva la carne a su casa?
Sí, el que ha cazado no la lleva. Pero antiguamente no era así. Antiguamente le cocinábamos así con dos cerdos, sacar su tripa así enterito, una olla grande. Y ahí se le cocinaba a ese animal. Y invitamos a toda la comunidad, a toda la población, ¿no? Y comíamos todos juntos iguales ahí.
Anthropologists call this system of communal sharing reciprocity. For the Maihunas, as for most indigenous tribes, it is a thing of the past. Today, no one in the village will eat these majas. They will be taken to market, a few hours boat ride away, and sold.
La reciprocidad es un sistema que funciona dentro del grupo, dentro de la familia. Y hablar de familia, estamos hablando siempre de familia extensa, a veces puede ser muy numerosa, ¿no? Yo cazo, yo tengo obligaciones de entregar parte de ese animal a tales y cuales personas porque son las que constituyen mi grupo de relación, y cuando ellos cacen, cuando ellos capturen un animal, van a hacer lo mismo. Si yo pesco, exactamente igual. Que esto no es lo que se llama trueque, porque el trueque es toma esto y dame esto. No es así. Esto es yo te doy y tú, cuando tengas, tú me das.
Adam Smith, you can't really blame him. He didn't really have the evidence. But since then, economists have been told over and over again by anthropologists, well, no, people don't actually do that. So we've been looking for a society like that for 200 years. They don't exist. Yet they still feel obliged to tell the same story. So clearly this story is doing something for them, which has nothing to do with history or empirical reality.
The Maihunas did not evolve from bartering and trading into a market economy, no matter what 18th century theory would have us believe. Rather, colonization and the market system tracked them down in the 19th century, once rubber was found in the Amazon. Many Maihunas and other tribespeople were enslaved and murdered during the rubber boom that followed. Only a few fading photographs remain, and the collective tribal memory of their transformation into day laborers.
Solamente han trabajado como esclavos, han trabajado como personas que solamente como quizás no entendían mucho qué es un dinero solamente para una vestimenta. Entonces prácticamente estas cosas, yo entiendo que esto han trabajado mucho los Maihunas.
So if Adam Smith's science of man cannot explain the building blocks of a market economy, how did the market evolve historically?
Qui fait le capitalisme? Pour les idéologues, ce sont les grands penseurs, Smith, Ricardo. Pour moi, ce sont les marchands de Venise, les marchands de Bruges. Ce sont les acteurs qui inventent les institutions du capitalisme. Et Adam Smith est simplement une lointaine justification de ce mécanisme-là dans le domaine des idées.
So capitalism was not the product of ideas, but of historical processes that transformed the Maihunas, and indeed all of us, into Homo economicus. These sweeping historical changes were unleashed by a single key event.
גילוי אמריקה היה מאורע מכונן גם של המהפכה המדעית וגם של הקפיטליזם, של הכלכלה הקפיטליסטית. באופן מאוד מאוד שלוב, הדוק אחד בשני. למה הוא מאורע מכונן מבחינה מדעית? כי התפיסה המסורתית של ידע הייתה שרוב הידע, כל הידע החשוב, ההכרחי, כבר נמצא ברשותנו. הוא כבר התגלה לידי הקדמונים, הוא כבר קיים בספרי קודש, בתנ"ך, בברית החדשה וכן הלאה, ומה שבעיקר צריך לעשות זה ללמוד את הידע הזה ולחיות לפיו. והאירופאים, לא זו בלבד שהם מגלים חצי עולם חדש, אלא מתחילים לכבוש אותו, ליישב אותו, לסחוט ממנו כסף, ממטעי טבק, מטעי כותנה, ממכרות זהב, ממכרות כסף. אתה רוצה לכבוש את אמריקה ולשלוט בה, אתה צריך מהר להשיג המון ידע חדש. ידע גיאוגרפי, ידע אנתרופולוגי, ידע בלשני, ידע על צמחים, על בעלי חיים, על אקלים, וזה מה שהאירופאים עושים.
So the discovery of the Americas was a formative event for the scientific revolution. But what was its connection to the evolution of capitalism?
The interesting thing is that our entire arguments about world history, I think, are on a false basis. We argue, why is it that Europe was in a position to conquer the world and not anybody else? Well, maybe that isn't the right question. I mean, it's very clear that in many periods of time, China, for example, could have easily done what the conquistadors did.
15世纪初，是吧？郑和下西洋，从1405年开始，郑和第一次下西洋。那么一直到1433年啊，郑和第7次下西洋以后结束啊。那么在这个以后啊，那么差不多80年。80多年以后啊，西方才开始东来。但是从这个规模上来看啊，从这个人员的配备以及这个船只的这个技术啊，造船的技术以及航海的技术来看，那么在这80多年前啊，这个郑和下西洋的时候，那么中国应该说是在这个站在这个世界的这个航海的前列的。
It just never occurred to them to depopulate entire continents to be able to accumulate, masses of gold and silver. It would have seemed completely psychotic to most people on Earth. So it's not that everybody wants to rule the world. The question is, why did Europe actually end up doing it? I think the answer lies in this peculiar relationship between lenders and entrepreneurs, as I call them. And if you think of the conquistadors as the archetypal entrepreneur who always wants more and more, who's always creating something out of nothing and in order to make more and more money.
So while Chinese voyages of discovery were decreed by an emperor, Western discoveries began as private initiatives, unleashing a completely different process.
מה שגילוי אמריקה מאותת למשקיעים, לבנקאים, למלכים, לסוחרים, זה שיש פה באמת הזדמנות אדירה על ידי השקעות ביוזמות חדשות לקבל תשואה גדולה לאין שיעור ממה שהשקעתי מלכתחילה. אנשים מוכנים לתת סכומים הרבה יותר גדולים של כסף, הרבה יותר בקלות, כי יש את הדוגמה של קולומבוס, הנה זה עבד שם. ומשם זה מתחיל, כלומר יש פה איזשהו מין מעגל קסמים כזה. והיזמים, עכשיו יש יותר אשראי ליזמים, אז כמובן שחלקם כושלים, לא כל הדברים מצליחים, כמו שרוב הסטארט-אפים היום לא מצליחים. אבל מספיק שאחד לכמה סטארט-אפים גיאוגרפיים כאלה באמת מצליח, ואתה מקים לעצמך מושבה בפיליפינים או במקסיקו.
The conquest of Mexico in 1519 by Cortés is an example of this new link, created between geographic discoveries, colonization, and money.
The fascinating thing I discovered when I started looking at the actual histories of the conquistadors is every single one of them was in debt. Cortés basically got himself deeper and deeper into debt. He was a gambler. He said, to hell with it, I'm never going to get out of debt. I'm going to borrow even more money and just gamble everything on this crazy expedition.
El templo más importante de este lugar.
Pudiéramos decir que para el azteca, para el mexica, el oro no tenía validez física. Para el español sí la tenía, era un metal muy importante por los diversos usos que le podía dar, desde económico hasta material, llamémosle científico, con muchos usos. Me voy a retractar un poco, voy a contradecir. Para el mexica, el valor del oro supera el valor material.
When asked by the envoy of Montezuma, the Mexica king, about his obsession with gold, Cortés replied, "My companions and I are suffering from a disease of the heart, for which there is no cure but gold."
As soon as he actually conquered Tenochtitlan, which took a very long time, when he divided up the spoils, he'd arranged things in such a way that none of his soldiers actually got any of the money. They ended up in debt because he charged them for the cost of medical care, he charged them for replacement weapons, he charged them for everything. They were all in debt, they were up in arms, they were going to kill him. He finally said, look, okay, I tell you what, I'm not going to let you off the hook, I'll give you a 10-year moratorium, go off to the provinces and govern those. And so they became these incredibly rapacious governors who just extracted as much money as possible. I think that sense of outrage, of shame, humiliation, indignation, like we just fought for an entire year and somehow survived one of the greatest battles in world history, and they're still not paying me anything? They just say, I owe them? This is crazy. And that sense of outrage and unlimited power combined turns them into monsters.
William Shakespeare, in The Merchant of Venice, tried to humanize such lenders and the passions inflamed by money.
He hath disgraced me and hindered me 500,000, laughed at my losses, mocked at my gains, scorned my nation.
You never actually see the guys that Cortés or people like that owe money to. You don't really know who they were. But that relationship between the financiers who are expecting their 5% or whatever it is, 7% a year interest, and the entrepreneur, as it were, the warrior who goes out there and conquers worlds, that relationship becomes the very basis of our modern economic monetary system, even though we no longer think of it that way.
וזה המעגל קסמים של ההשקעות והכיבושים, וזה מעגל הקסמים שמתחיל עם גילוי אמריקה ומניע את שני מעגלים האלה, גם המעגל של הגילויים המדעיים וגם המעגל של הכלכלה הקפיטליסטית, של באמת אשראי, השקעות, רווחים, עוד אשראי, עוד השקעות, עוד רווחים.
The Spanish conquistadors, with their voracious appetite for precious metals, found here a mountain of silver. They called it Cerro Rico, the rich mountain. Over the 3 centuries that followed, more than 62 metric tons of silver was extracted from Cerro Rico, at great human cost.
And it's the silver. But it's no good quality of silver, not like in the colonial time.
It was this silver that triggered an explosion in international trade. In China, the Latin American silver fueled a dramatic expansion of the commercial market.
Many people now still think that China was isolated from the world before the 19th century. It is a world on its own. It's not interacting and trading. In fact, now it is very clear that the European great discoveries of the Americas and things like that actually has a real, very important impact on China. Before the 16th century, the Chinese economy was based on a paper currency. That is, the government prints some paper for people to use in transactions. And it is very unstable because the value of the currency is not based on any precious metal. So the commercial economy was not very advanced until China, the Chinese government, as an attempt to fight inflation and this economic stability, shift to a silver-based economy. China at that time then found a very reliable, stable and large source of silver. So the whole economy was silverized, meaning that silver became the standard currency for commercial transactions. So it laid the foundation for rapid commercial expansion.
Alors que chez nous, l'économie de marché devient capitaliste parce que le capital prend une position très importante, une position de force. En Chine, c'est sans doute un peu différent. Les producteurs en Chine, que ce soit des paysans, que ce soit des artisans, vont au XIIe siècle avoir un accès au marché libre, d'eux-mêmes. Ils vont aller vendre eux-mêmes leur production sans être obligés de se mettre sous la coupe d'un marchand ou d'un capitaliste qui, grâce à son argent, va pouvoir leur avancer quelque chose qui ressemble à un salaire.
The market that evolved, made of small producers who interacted freely without the need of an entrepreneur or capitalist, attracted the attention of European travelers and missionaries. Their stories impressed French philosophers and physiocrats, and Adam Smith.
The row over a third runway at Heathrow Airport has overshadowed the Prime Minister's first full-scale ministerial reshuffle.
But in Britain, the global market fueled by silver from the Americas had a completely different impact. While in China it encouraged small producers, here it destroyed them. Simon Furley is an advocate for independent small farmers, which has become a rather rare breed since the 16th century.
If you're really good, you could make a minimum wage out of 4 cows, 4 dairy cows, not intensively fed. And that would require about 10 acres, something like that. I've got 2 cows, and in order to do it full time, you'd need 4, and you'd have to be good.
how independent farmer has been squeezed like that. This is like 400 years process.
Yes, about that. Well, it kind of dates back to enclosure from the 16th century onward, when small farmers were pushed off land so that the larger landowners could monopolize the land and improve it, to make it more productive, which they did. But they threw the bulk of people off the land in the process. And it didn't have to happen that way.
The silver that flooded countries like Spain created a growing demand for English wool, which made raising sheep more profitable. Peasants were displaced to make room for more sheep. The process was called enclosure.
Les enclosures, en fait, c'est le désir des seigneurs, des propriétaires terriens, qui sont parfois aussi des bourgeois au XVIe siècle en Grande-Bretagne. C'est leur désir de faire respecter un droit de propriété qui, jusqu'à présent, était par la tradition plus ou moins géré en commun, laissé en culture pour les populations qui étaient les plus pauvres. Donc à partir du XVIe, les seigneurs et les bourgeois se mettent à faire valoir leur droit à la terre.
It was coercive. I wouldn't say it was massively violent. There was just a lot of rioting and a lot of resistance, and a lot of poverty, and people shoved into urban situations which had a very high death rate. So in a sense it was violent insofar as the death rate in the emerging new industrial towns was higher than it was in the countryside.
They throw down houses, wrote Thomas More. They pluck down towns and leave nothing standing, but only churches to be made into sheep houses.
Les conséquences en Angleterre sont énormes. Que faire à ce moment-là? La seule solution viable à long terme, c'est d'essayer de trouver un travail comme artisan pour filer ou tisser à domicile. Tout d'un coup, une armée de gens totalement appauvris par les enclosures sont condamnés à vendre leurs forces de travail de façon à pouvoir survivre, tout simplement survivre.
This army of dispossessed, homeless, and jobless peasants have become a potential labor force, helping to create a labor market.
How do you create a market? That's very interesting. How do you create a market that's disembodied from society? You can pass all kinds of laws, which happened in England between 1650 and about the early 19th century, that criminalize poverty. You can make it a capital offense for the stealing of a handkerchief. Children can be executed. You can imprison people because they can no longer pay their debts. So the amount of terroristic type of laws that are being passed to criminalize poverty, to increase debt, to create human beings that can be bought and sold, that helps bring about a particular kind of market.
Come on, Africa. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on.
The people who were thrown off the land lost their connection with the land. If you have access to land, so you have a certain measure of independence. You are your own boss, and you're not really beholden to anybody. And whereas once you're alienated from the land, you're in a much more insecure situation, and you're less able to contest the forces of the economy. What you've got now is a situation where, in order to keep the wheels of capitalism turning, you had to persuade people to consume. which was kind of one of the problems with people living on their own land, on common land or whatever it was that they weren't that wild about going out and consuming. You don't need to go and buy very much if you actually live in a place like this. There's just loads to do and keep yourself amused and eat and so forth at your disposal.
So the trail of silver and gold that began in the New World helped to stimulate a global market that eventually transformed British society. Around the world, private entrepreneurs were using the newly found riches to build empires.
Smith is fascinated, as he has to be, by the mushroom spread of empire. After all, every country in Europe is founding colonies in the underdeveloped world. And how are those colonies being developed? They're being developed actually, as we would say, by the private sector. Great trading companies, what are they doing? They're moving, with permission of government, into different parts of the world. And these trading companies are becoming governments.
We're standing on the banks of the River Clyde, and in front of you at the moment you can see a tall tower with a blue clock on it. Wealthy merchants, way back in the 18th century, stood on that tower looking down the river to see their ships coming in. And these wealthy merchants had a sort of triangular trading route. They took goods from here in Scotland to the Gold Coast in Africa. The goods they took from Africa to the West Indies was people.
Ships from Europe brought goods to Africa, then took slaves to the New World and brought raw materials back to Europe. It was called a triangular trade and was mainly a private enterprise, which contributed to the emergence of market economy.
The workings of commerce and empire in the 18th century, right the way through Europe, is increasingly dependent on black slavery. Smith knows this very well. He, after all, was a close student of the workings of the Scottish economy of his own day, but he chose to turn a blind eye on slavery.
By the 1500s, the transatlantic slave trade was well underway, spearheaded by the Portuguese. And when they came, they put up these castles along the coast. And I want to remind you that these were not referred to as castles. They called them barracoons, or factories. Factories that were meant to produce slaves for the plantations. You see this? That's the national emblem of Ghana. It is taken from the Crusaders. At the top right corner of it is an edifice of a castle. Shows the role these castles have played in the social, economic, and political development of Ghana. This was the male dungeon. There were no lights. So the hole up there provided them with light and ventilation. And they stayed here for about 3 months on the average. Whilst they were here, they urinated, they defecated, they vomited, they ate, and they slept here. So this served as a drainage for their feces and urine. When it rains,
water came in to wash the floor. But the whole place got covered with filth, and many of them got sick and died here.
מה שצריך להבין לגבי סחר העבדים, שזה מפעל כלכלי למהדרין, שמאורגן על ידי השוק הקפיטליסטי, זה לא מפעל ממשלתי, זה לא מפעל של מלכים, מי שמארגן אותו ויוזם אותו ומבצע אותו, אלה חברות פרטיות.
Liverpool became the leading slave trading port in Britain. London and Bristol had kind of dallied with slavery beforehand, but you get to the 1750s and Liverpool really took it to another level. You know, you're not talking about a 50 or 75-year period. These were generations of individuals, of families that made their entire kind of fortunes on the enslavement of individuals. Thomas Golightly was one of the mayors of Liverpool. He was also one of the traders in Liverpool who traded in Africa. Now, he was a very important man. He was the treasurer for a number of societies. And what it shows is how influential individuals in this city were, who were involved in the transatlantic slave trade.
שמאיפה יש להם כסף לקנות אוניות ולקנות עבדים ואת כל הדברים האלה? מהשקעות של בני אדם בבורסה. אנשים משקיעים את הכסף שלהם בבורסה, במניות של חברות סחר עבדים, או שמים את זה בבנק, והבנק נותן הלוואה לחברה לסחר עבדים, ועם הכסף הזה עושים את סחר העבדים. וכל הסיפור שם זה רק רווח. אין שם, זה לא נבע מאיזושהי, נגיד, שנאה גזענית כלפי האפריקאים. לא, הגזענות הזאת הייתה הרבה יותר חלשה, הגזענות היא תוצר של העבדות, היא לא משהו שבא לפני העבדות.
"400 years of slavery. Capitalism, deadly. Everybody wants his share."
It is often said that Smith was insensitive to social movements and social change of his time. Perhaps the elephant in the Wealth of Nations room, slavery.
Certain economists and historians would have us believe that what we call free market capitalism was envisioned by Adam Smith and his book, The Wealth of Nations, and came to life with the Industrial Revolution. But the origins of our present-day economic system can be found more than 7,000 kilometers across the Atlantic, and 200 years before the publication of Smith's book.
The plantations of the New World were the first productive activity which Europe located in these non-European regions. Prior to that, they either looted or they traded. And they looted and they traded, and they occupied and they settled. And some of these plantations were very large, far exceeding any factory at the time in Europe. It had all the characteristics I would maintain of capitalism, with the sole exception that the labor was not wage labor, but unfree slave labor. But in every other way, it was capitalist to the exclusion of any other consideration. It was only about profit.
For Smithians in general, they have a hard time relating extra-economic coercion like slavery with sort of normal economic transactions. And therefore, things like slavery, they associate it with some kind of barbaric, primitive, pre-developed, underdeveloped society, which cannot possibly be related to a modern, developed economy. But a strong case can be made that capitalism actually started in the 16th century with the colonization of the Caribbean and Latin America.
Le capitalisme échappe même à ses créateurs. Vous voyez très bien, il a sa propre dynamique. C'est un fauve très difficilement contrôlable. Et on utilise de façon ad hoc la plupart des arguments théoriques, mais clairement, il échappe même à l'intelligibilité des meilleurs des acteurs.
But if indeed the birth of capitalism has nothing to do with Adam Smith, why has his book, The Wealth of Nations, become such an influential work? And why is his view of the economy as science so widely held?